begin. Welcome everybody to Kelly House and welcome to Sunday Afternoon With. This is our 5th presentation for this season. We start out in April and every 4th Sunday of the month through October give a presentation that relates to local history. And so far we've had the Comptche Fire Department, we've had the early innkeepers, we've had musicians, and we had one last month on the architecture of Mendocino. And today we have one about people. So the object here is to not only keep history alive and make us all remember things from the past, but also have it preserved in the museum for those who come along in the future and wonder, well, what was it like in those days? So it's a good way to have us all reminisce and at the same time have it for those who come along later wondering. So about Kelly House, we hope that you will consider becoming a member. We are very active. With a membership, you receive a copy of the Historical Society's publication every year, and you also get a discount for our Sunday afternoon program events. And we have a wonderful auction that's coming up in September this year as our main fundraiser for the year. And also, if you're interested in becoming a docent, it's a fun time to be in the house, to welcome visitors, show them around, tell them stories about the past, and really promote the museum as part of an important part of our town here in Mendocino. The program today is taped. We want to thank Terry Vaughn from Mendocino TV, and it will be available afterwards for sale through the office. And if you know anybody who missed one of the earlier programs but who'd like a DVD of it, we do have those available as well. And if you have any questions about that, they have the order forms and we'll help you out with that in the office. Or we can take the order forms today if you prefer. So I am very pleased to announce and excited to welcome Lisa Gruel-Spicer, who is a professor of anthropology at Western Washington University in Bellevue, Washington.
Bellingham.
Excuse me?
Bellingham.
Bellingham. Oh, what did I say?
Bellevue.
There is one right there, yeah.
That's what Mike was saying.
Bellingham. Okay. Being not a Washingtonian, I apologize.
That's okay.
So, the story goes that Lisa came to Comptche in 1970 with her mother and 2 sisters in a purple school bus. And she was part of the growing group there of new arrivals who, at the time, even today, we still call hippies. And she attended the elementary school here in Mendocino and also the high school here in Mendocino. Then, along in 2008, she decided to come back to her 30th reunion at the high school. And much to her surprise, she found that Comptche was very much the same as it had been 30 years earlier when she was growing up there. And this absolutely fascinated her. And at the same time, she had just started her master's program in anthropology, and she decided she wanted to find out what were the ingredients that were making this community so special, of the old-timers and the new people having come together, supporting a community, working together, and that was the question that she brought up to write her thesis. So the title of today's presentation is Common Ground, and it turns out that is the element that really has helped make everything work so well. So I think we should give a warm welcome to Lisa Spicer.
This is exciting to be able to present research that that's fresh and new, and we're presenting it back to the community from which it was done. And that's one thing that we do in anthropology is we take our research back and our findings back to the communities where we studied it. Now it's happening more and more among ourselves because all the undiscovered people have been discovered in all those exotic places. So now we're using anthropology to look at ourselves. And that was one of the wonderful things that this project is helping with in anthropology is helping with is to actually understand the 70s. As probably a lot of us young people that were kids back then, you go off into the world and make friends and you think that well, we're culture bound. You think that our normal reality is everyone else's reality, and it was very different. And I realized that we had a very unique type of childhood and unique town. Maybe not totally unique in Mendocino County, but certainly in relation to the rest of the big wide world. So what I'm going to do is skim through a little bit of history. Some of you may not be really well versed in the Mendocino, the North Coast history. But it gives context, and to me that's really important because even for the whole hippie movement, well, why did that happen? What was the culture that created the counterculture? So I'm kind of always thinking, well, why did we do that? What was the situation that created this? So we're going to do a real quick tour through, see if I can do this technology. Okay, the North Coast. And especially remember, this is presented to my faculty in my research committee in Washington State. So there's a little bit more that I know most of you are familiar with. But of course, this is the North Coast from Bodega Bay up to the Oregon border. So that's the general area that we're looking at. And this in specific is Comptche. This is the Comptche Prior Road. And I do believe that this is the store. I think, now this is going on automatic slideshow, and I couldn't make it stop, so I'm going to have to see if I can do this. I've been telling it off, and it keeps repeating, so anyway, stop. Maybe if I hit stop, it goes blank. It'll make me talk fast. Anyway, this is the Comptche Prior Road. There are this is a little bit frustrating that it keeps moving on me, but there are autobiographical elements. I was in the class of 78. I didn't actually graduate from here. I was in France for my senior year of high school doing a homestay program. But there was conflict in this. James is.
It's going down slow.
It's okay. Okay. There was conflict in the 70s in Comptche, which was probably common to a lot of different places, but it was never violent conflict. It was never horrible, you can't deal with it kind of conflict. It was kind of subtle, and I could hear the adults talking about people being blackballed at the Grange, back to landers that wanted to join, that kind of thing. So we did hear a little bit of conflict. Wasn't huge, but it was enough to know that there is not just all, wine and roses here in Comptche. Something is amiss. So my research resources, there were 34 participants from Comptche. Some of them still live there and some of them live elsewhere. There was a 64% response rate out of the people that I did ask, which is really high. More common response rate for surveys is around 32%. So that told me that there was a lot of interest in the community in responding and participating. 50% were kids in the 70s, which I thought was interesting, and pretty well representative of both the old-timers and the newcomers. I did a questionnaire that I mailed out to everybody before I came here for a year to live with my family. I did interviews, and I did an anthropological research method called participant observation, where I would volunteer and just hang out with people and work in the community.
If you use pause, that should stop that.
Thank you. That's because it's very distracting. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Now I am a Gemini, but that was a little bit of a stretch. So then the research research materials I used were archives, and of course Kelly House was a wonderful treasure trove of archives here. The Mendocino Beacon, I found all kinds of great stuff from that period of time because we had a columnist, Elsa Thompson, who wrote Comptche and the Coast. And there was, I've been mentioned there a few times because of 4-H and that type of thing, but everybody in town was probably mentioned in those columns at some point. There were literature and publications. I had to go to the county seat to find out how many people were in Comptche in 1970. That information, it's such a small town, it's not, some of those numbers are not easy to find. I couldn't believe the lengths I went to find this one number. I just need a population in the 70s. So I had to go to the county, and then I watched a lot of films. So get ready to pause it. It jumps on me. Whoops.
What kind of film? Like home film?
I saw things like, I watched a lot of movies about hippies in the 60s and that type of thing. A lot of news clips. There's a lot of news footage, archival footage on the internet now. It's really amazing. I saw, what I'm trying to think of, the counterculture movement. Anyway, there's a lot of really good footage out there that's available on the internet. So not all of them are like complete documentaries, but there's a lot of good film clips that were news media. So then when I've collected all this data, I use this thing called the developmental research sequence. So it's a method I'm not going to go into depth, but just in case you're interested, there's a way to analyze your findings, and you look for patterns. And this material is just screaming with patterns. It was really fun to work with. And then from out of that, we create what were called cultural domains that help us to organize meetings. So we're going to get into that. But onward. So. So I went way back, and even 1500s is when Spain was first sailing off the coast. But Spain colonizes California and establishes missions. In the late 1700s, Russians have a colony at Bodega Bay. By the early 1800s, there's a lot of people and a lot of nations that want claim to this land, and all of them were claiming it at that time. In 1811, the Russians moved north and they established Fort Ross, or Colony Ross, which probably many of you have been to. Okay. Pause. In 1820 run, the Russians hunt the sea otters to near extinction, and this is kind of this pattern that that we start to see here in the whole area of the North Coast with resources like fishing and timber becoming depleted, and then that affects the population. So that totally determines who lives here and why. So there's been ebb and flow of population in this whole area since it's been established, and it's directly related to resources.
Who escorted the Russians out?
The U.S. Navy escorted them out. Yeah, and they had to leave lickety split. That's a wonderful story, sad story about Colony Ross. But they had to leave. I know there were plows left in the soil and blacksmith tools left out. They had to just leave. And then there was the Mexican-American War, which of course Americans won. Interesting here, I didn't really catch this in grade school. These things didn't make as much sense to me, but the gold rush followed immediately after that war. California then was admitted into the Union because, hey, we got gold, right? So they're admitted into the United States. And in 1855, the Mendocino Indian Reservation was established, and that went from Mendocino up towards Fort Bragg, and Fort Bragg was about the Indian Reservation and overseeing that, not necessarily a military outpost for war, although it could have had to do with keeping the Russians out and that type of thing, but it was primarily linked to the reservation. In 1862, Comptche's first homestead was established, and that's a fun story that we're going to get to. and in 1873, Indian lands were released to the public domain. So Indians on the Mendocino Reservation came from all over Ukiah. They were pushed inland, and they weren't used to the coastal weather. It's really hard for a lot of them. But I think when we're talking about immigrants, which the story is about, I wanted to look at, well, who was here first? Who was here very first? And I want to acknowledge that. So Pomo means people, and most native tribes, that's true, their name translates into the people. They were a confederated tribe, meaning that there's more like a lot of small bands. They weren't all one big pan tribe that had the same practices and beliefs. They were all slightly different. And in pre-contact, there was around 8,000 people here. They had their summer camp at Bull Dam at Big River, where we all love to go, and that becomes a significant spot in this story. Military outpost was in Fort Bragg for the Mendocino Indian Reservation, and that reservation was 25,000 acres. That was a lot of land that was allotted, but that's how all of our ancestors bought land here originally. Whoever bought that land, that's where it came from. And the Indians then were moved east into, was it Round Valley or Covelo? Thank you, yeah.
There's one little reservation still in Fort Bragg.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Off of the mill property.
Really?
Is that right?
Is there anyone
Yeah.
still there?
It's
Behind North Cliff, 5 acres.
Wow. Thank you for that. So this is a wonderful story about Newman Hoke. He came up here with a hunting party from San Francisco, and he was 28, and they landed at Bull Dam, down at Big River, and he got out and he was amazed at the country here, and it was probably even more beautiful then there was no bridges and roads. I mean, it was probably just amazing. He was charmed by the beauty of the virgin wilderness. He followed a party of Pomo Indians over a trail which led from Mendocino to Ukiah, and that was a story that his daughter Charlotte Hope wrote in the 50s. Now, I think it's really a wonderful thing, and every time since I've done this research and I found this out, every time I go over the Comptche Ukiah Road, that was established by the Pomo people who walked from Bull Dam to Comptche, and that was their prairie camp where they pounded, and Katie Tile has to tell the story. They pounded abalone and let it dry in the sun. They collected acorns and materials for baskets, and it was a holdover there for, I don't know, months, weeks, but a while. And then they would eventually then finish their journey over to Ukiah where they would winter. So Comptche was a very important stopover place, and it continues to be. That's probably why I include the Indian part in this, because it was already, they sort of set the stage for the wonderful place that this is. This was Newman Hoke's ranch, and these hills are really distinctive. And I think this is now the Grimes Ranch, am I right? Yeah, that's
It's
the
not the
Grimes
Grimes
Ranch.
Ranch, but Smith owns it, Oscar
Okay.
Smith.
And I've personally never been out there, but I know I would recognize those hills, and that was a real distinct marker for the tribe as well. And so this is where they were. So Charlotte Hoke says, my father made an agreement with the Indians never to cut down the Indian acorn orchards or destroy their salmon waters. That has happened, but not by him.
Not by,
Pardon?
not by agreement.
Right, not by agreement. And it's just part of what happens, when people buy land. Anyway, they had the permanent prairie camp. They have a spring out there called Living Waters, and apparently I read that it had some fencing around it to keep the cows out. But it's apparently a real healing mineral water. I don't think it's potable, it's not used for drinking, but I think it's for, there's a lot of minerals in it. And as we know, our family had a hard time with mineral water. You couldn't drink it. They would, as I said, they gathered acorns and that type of thing. There's a burial mound somewhere out there on that ranch for Chief Comptche, a high point at the hayfield and prairie camp. There's discrepancy about the name of Comptche, what it means, and there's some research I found that said it means the Valley of Many Hills or something like that. But I did find, so I didn't really mention it because we're not sure, but I did see it mentioned quite a number of times that there was a Chief Comptche. So the place was likely named for him, but there are, this is in, research, historical research, there's often discrepancies and you don't quite know exactly what's right, but anyway. Now the one thing I think is important too is there was 50 years of peaceful coexistence, at least 50 years, between the early settlers of Comptche and the Como, and they came and went, and they continued on their cycles. Whereas elsewhere in Anderson Valley, if this wasn't the case, Indians were getting raided and kidnapped to go work on farms and do harvesting and that type of thing, and so they weren't treated so well other places. And then you have the reservation, so that's not a good thing. But for some interesting reason, the Como, Comptche, that camped at Big River were able to keep going back and forth for quite a while. So Comptche is established in 1877 with their post office, where it still is today. Is that the same spot where in 1877 did they move it? They didn't move it. They moved it. Okay, but it was the same post office.
It's the same building.
Correct, it was the
Oh, I
nurses.
see.
So I love this picture. That's the same post office. It just amazes me. And here we have Charlotte Hope right there, Newman Hope's daughter.
Quite a
And
class,
there's some other Hopes. There's all the names here: Oppenlander, Hoke, Thompson, Docker, and just the Strauss, the names that you hear a lot in the material. There's all the kids there. Comptche kids. Comptche kids. Comptche kids. Comptche used a timber and hay. They supplied a lot of timber, but a lot of hay for the oxen that were used in the timber industry. So Comptche, I don't know if some of you haven't been out there. You get through all the trees, you drive through these, endless redwood forests, and then you start coming into this valley, and there's another little valley, and there's beautiful, grass, hay, they're hay fields. So that hay was used and then grown for a lot of the work teams of animals that they had. And here's just some of those great old logging photos. This is a really wonderful part of the story. Splitting railroad ties. Buddy Stenbach tells that story, and I have his quote there a little further down. But I love this picture because it really shows clearly. Oh yeah, we all know what those railroad ties are. But I always heard about railroad ties and tie landing and different references to
Different
railroad
names,
ties.
yeah.
And what are railroad ties? Now I really understand it. And here's some more stacked up, ready to go. And then this is quoted right from one of the interviews that I did. This is an old-time Comptche resident. He said, lumber companies like the Finns, they worked hard and didn't complain. Comptche was known for making ties. Southern Pacific Railroad bought Albion Lumber Company for the supply of lumber to make ties. It was easy for an immigrant to get set up. All they needed was a cross-cut saw, a handsaw, and a sledgehammer. For not much expense, they could be in business. Land was easily acquired. The Homestead Act opened up. I remember the steamship ads that said, "Go west, young man." And that really happened. And there was a lot of immigrants from different European countries that came here that had worked in the timber industry in Europe, and they were recruited here in this type of way. And so that's, I just think that that's a really important part of the story. And this also, I don't know if David Taya's grandfather or dad or who, Andrew Taya?
Father.
Father.
That was his dad.
Okay. I just think that's an amazing picture. So there were early communes on the coast. The hippies weren't the first ones to set up communes. And I thought, that's interesting, because all these patterns that I'm looking for, right? So Sointala was a Finnish commune. It was in Fort Bragg, and this picture, I believe, is in Comptche. It was in the Kelly House's Comptche files, but I still think that it's a good representation of what it would be like to set up house in the woods. And they were a Finnish commune that started with 4 families, and I like how this is something that Comptche style, this kind of building bee, everybody helping each other, barn raisings or quilting bee kind of approach to living in the country. They helped each other and they depended on each other. There were a number of communes out here, and they were mostly based on language, shared language. There was Germans, there was Portuguese, there was Finns, and they're based on their ethnic heritage and mode of exchange. Sometimes they brought their own currency.
Oh.
So, and this was, Comptche was about logging, and it still is, but not to the degree that it was then. And this is logs coming down Big River, and that blows my mind. Yeah. And then this is the Big River, and I don't know exactly if this is at the mouth or what, but remembering that Bull Dam was the camp, the summer camp for the Pomo, which that is no longer the case here. Social life in the Redwoods, everybody was very isolated. They built a Comptche Community Hall, which was completed in 1913, maybe not quite completed. And this is just a crease in the photograph. It's not lightning bolts or anything. And this is the Oppenlander family. Hello. If you're late, you have to sit in the front.
Yeah, thanks.
I'm so glad you came. Here. Cohort. And I love this picture of the Oppenlander family with their dog up there. That is just something that you would see today. Just that kind of life out there. So people were living really isolated, and a lot of their single men were living in mill shacks. It was just like a little RV. I mean, today we probably would have pulled those little RVs out there and lived in those. But they had these little mill shacks, and when they would get together, and these are wonderful stories that are written. Ethel Docker wrote a wonderful book about this, and she said that some of the cabins out there had walls that were removable, so they'd pull out a wall and probably put it outside, and then they'd throw all the kids in the back room to go to sleep, and they would dance all night. And because took a long time to get to people's houses, must have taken hours by horseback or a wagon or something, maybe even a day, because sometimes people would come from Albion into Comptche. So it was a long drive. So you didn't just go to somebody's dinner and then go home. You had to stay the night. So they would make a weekend of it, and that really helped to sustain the community. And this kind of partying in the woods is a theme in Comptche that persists to this day. And the Comptche Community Hall is still an incredible building that is housing so many wonderful celebrations and probably some sad ones too. And there's memorials and things, but it's a really important building in Comptche. This scene you would see in the 70s and even today, the kids with the animals, and you still see this kind of thing. Comptche, so this is a statement from Charlotta Layton in her book about the Comptche fire. She wrote, Comptche section, so well known for its beauty, which enjoys a greater reputation for a health-giving climate. It was in search of that precious treasure, health, that I came to Comptche. The yard about my house had been sown to red clover. A few fine young redwoods standing with their feet in the green mat only added to its beauty. That could fit today. That's what I was surprised with by going back to Comptche in 2008. Wow, it's still beautiful. Nobody ruined it. How did they do that? So, and this was her, Charlotta Layton's story that I pulled that quote from. And that's a publication of the Comptche Fire Department. That's a really interesting story. I don't have time to go into it. Comptche in the 40s, just kind of skimming through the decades here. I thought it was really interesting to hear that a lot of the women, because the men were off either in war or working, and so the women volunteered to keep watch. As at Keene Summit, where they did that. And one thing I forgot to say is, since this is anthropology and it's research, it's like a living project. So participants that are here, that if you see any errors or corrections or clarifications that need to be made or misspellings in names, please let me know, because I want to make sure that this is correct as it can be.
Yeah. Galena Matt, that's Lena Machesnik.
Thank you. That's what, because short, that's why.
Uh-huh.
In the records of Kelly House. This is Lena Mack, but it's Lena McChesney.
Yeah.
Is that Lena, L-E-N-A, right?
Yeah,
Yep.
she's, was an Addison.
Okay. Great. There's a couple other names here that I think need correcting. This painting, I got an e-copy of it from Maya Stenbach, so this is probably a painting in the Stenbach family. But Comptche in the 50s, this was one of the mills that was out there. This was a statement from an old-timer who was a teenager during that time. By the 1950s, the mills were running. There was an influx in the 50s due to the mills. I was in the first grade in 1960, and there was 33 kids in the Comptche school. The Philbrook mill burned in 64, and a lot of people left. It was the major mill, so there was no industry here in the 60s, and a lot of people left. So there you go with resource employment, and a mill is a resource too, and if you don't have the resources, the people leave, but it created this vacuum. So in the 60s, there's people moving out, and you can guess what happened next.
Here we come.
So this was a statement made by a Back to the Lander that I thought sounded very much like the Charlotte Layton statement about its secluded location and expansive wilderness provide an Eden-like beauty. The forest filled with healing herbs and magnificent wildflowers, wild animals are enchanting. And then Elsa Thompson had written in her book that it's truly a Garden of Eden. You hear that a lot about Comptche, people referring to it as this beautiful, magical place. So it's founded in this is just kind of recap, it's founded in 1877. There's 130 square miles, but some people really like this information, so I want to provide it. It's timber country, it is zoned as a timberland preserve area, and that's important information that comes out of the second part of the story. The population in 1960, which I never did get an exact number, we estimated around 300, but this is the big number I went to Ukiah for, 463 in 1970, because I wanted to see how much it grew, but by 54 people were leaving. But look at in 2010, the year I was there, it was very similar. However, it was an aging population and there weren't as many kids. So there was a lot more adults in this number than here. Hippies were having a lot of babies. There was a lot of kids. And I think this is an interesting, it's just kind of an added statistic, but that there was 951 kids at the school district, the whole district, and in 2012 that was almost half.
Again, it was because the property in Mendocino got really expensive and people with families couldn't afford to live in this area.
And so there go the kids, and it's more of an elder population out there. Okay, so I think this is the, I have to go to now the second disc. My file was so large, it kept crashing, so I thought, well, I'll make 2 files. So here's part 2. How am I doing on time? Okay.
There's nobody coming in after you, so don't
Okay.
worry.
Okay. There's a lot to say, and I had to leave a bunch out because there just isn't time. Okay. Let's see.
That sign, 15 miles to Comptche, I used to be a park ranger, and people would say, what's this place Comptche? Because you come out
You see
128
it.
and there's 4
There's-
signs that say
yeah.
Comptche.
Yeah, it's
And I
funny.
say,
And nobody ever goes there.
and I
That's
say,
the funny thing.
don't blink, you'll miss it.
That's why they say all roads lead to Comptche.
Yeah.
Because you can see them on coming in
Oh, yeah.
Boonville too.
Yeah, from here.
Okay, so we have a little bit of a recap here, in case you forget where we are. So this is interesting. So in the research that I did, I looked at rural studies, and it's a topic area called rural studies. Well, what are other people finding out about, immigrants moving in and affecting the existing community? What happened in Comptche isn't unique. Research shows there is conflict between immigrants and conflict between immigrants and established residents should be expected. So it's so common that we should just know in all of our communities there is no surprise. It's really should be expected. Conflict among rural residents is often based on fear of change. And I had a participant, it's right here, this quote right here, "These change things that scared us." That is exactly the issue. conflict is based on assumptions and superficial appearances, and we'll see how this one plays out in Comptche. I like this general hippie stereotype. Hippie is, Ronald Reagan. So,
Oh my goodness.
he was the governor.
Ronald Reagan.
He was the governor of California in the 60s, and he dealt with the Berkeley riots and all the counterculture, the hippies and things protesting on the campuses and in San Francisco and Berkeley. He was mad. I've seen this footage of him, and I think it's a film called Berkeley in the 60s. There's a lot of footage of Reagan, and he is angry. He's like, father knows best, and he's like, those bad kids, he's talking about hippies as if they're just a bunch of bad boys, But they were saying something, and that's one of the points that I'm going to get to, is that there's a reason why all these young people were doing this. It wasn't just to look like Tarzan. But, so here's getting into some of this reasoning. The hippie creed was, and it probably still is, if it feels good, do it, just as long as it doesn't hurt anyone. I heard that so often in Comptche. And as I was doing my research, I found, a lot of these, now we have social media and we pick up phrases and things like that, but this type of stuff was in the magazines that the counterculture types were reading. So a lot of the slogans and the ideology were shared that way. The Back to Land imperative was to discover and create a new society on a human scale, so hence Comptche, people going back to land and this is back to the land, this isn't hippies in general, but and we'll see the differences in a few minutes, but, and social transformation by withdrawing from mainstream and creating smaller communities based around relationships. People are starting to feel really isolated. They might have grown up in the suburbs after we had World War II and the big war on poverty, and people after World War II, every American was promised a home. That was totally unrealistic, and they shouldn't have even said that. But it got people's expectations up, and then there was the white flight out of the urban areas to create the suburbs. So young people growing up in this milieu and all the materialism, because the people that fought World War II did without and had survived the Depression, and so now they want to give their kids everything. Their kids were kind of just drowning in materialism. They all went to college, really got educated on what's going on in the world, and they started to get angry. And these are their motivations: rejection of authority and technocracy. I heard that a lot back in the 70s, technocracy, or in the 60s too. We don't call it that anymore. The same thing like it was ecology, and now it's environmentalism or something. But that's where those things started. Frustration with hypocrisy in government, and there was a lot of that, and there still is. Freedom from modern materialism. People were starting to feel pressure to buy stuff. That's that keeping up with the Joneses thing, reacting to that. There was a concern for ecology, the natural world, peace, freedom, love, and, as I said, withdrawing from the middle class society. A lot of parents were scratching their heads. They didn't know. This is a pretty good society they're withdrawing from, is one of the statements I heard. A straight parent in a film clip, and I thought, that's I'm trying to see it from their point of view now, and I would probably, if I was in their shoes, I'd probably like, we built a really good thing from you, and now you hate us. But so there are different kinds of hippies. There are basically three types. There's the new left, urban, politically active, and those are the college campus based on Students for a Democratic Society and Weather Underground, and they really wanted to work for change through politics. Back to landers were not into politics. The commune hippies, communes were generally, hippie communes were generally short-lived because of, and there's studies and books on this and really great stuff, and I have a great bibliography if you want to read any of these books. But women's roles, women were saying they wanted to drive the tractor, and they wanted to go and do some of this, split wood and do some of the heavier work that they weren't allowed to do before because they were women. And they were stuck in the kitchen, and they were having all these babies. And they were beginning to realize that, if they're like this statement says, our straight sisters, at least they have security. because they're often having, it was very common for a woman to have kids with more than one father, and so then the guys split, because it's, do your own thing. So this woman is sitting there with all these kids at this commune and in the kitchen, and so that was a big problem for communes. And then a lack of leadership, because there's not supposed to have rules. It was anti-structure. And so anti-structure just creates a vacuum and it all just fell apart. A really great quote that I read about communes was somebody said it all falls apart in the fridge. And I think any of us that have had roommates might agree with that. So back to land hippies. These were hippies that are starting to have kids, and they're getting to be in their late 20s, early 30s, have kids. So they're returning to the garden, starting over, and it does refer to the Garden of Eden, and that's why I think the interesting comment about Comptche is so often referred to as the Garden of Eden, and that was kind of the general idea for the Backlanders. Withdraw from political activism, participation. I know a lot of Backlanders didn't vote. I don't know if that's for sure, but they talked about it. Don't vote, just withdraw, don't participate. Rejection of materialism, consumerism, and technocracy. So here's Joel Beek. It's like no helmets. Can you believe it? Anyways, counterculture hippies were influenced by the beatniks, and I'm sure there's some of you in here. So I'm hoping that I'm saying it right.
Is there a hand over there?
Yeah, back to the previous slide, there's a fourth category that I think is real important that's missing, and that was the pursuit of spiritual enlightenment.
Yeah.
That's true, but it was, I'm going to make a note of that. That should be among the motivations,
It's a whole
because my mom was really into
Whole
that.
different group.
You think it was they were part of communes?
Well, it was part of the communes, but it was a different purpose that was very non-political.
You're right. There was that, because my mom was motivated a lot by that, and some of her friends there. I remember hearing them talking hours and hours and hours about spirit. And then it kind of became called the New Age, but it wasn't called that then.
Not then.
As far as I remember, it wasn't named yet. Thank you for that, and I appreciate those kinds of comments, because a lot of you lived through it. So we're influenced by the beatniks. Communicated ideas via underground press and rock and roll, which I had mentioned. The song lyrics had a lot of meaning in them. Today they're mostly about breaking up and falling in love, but I miss that. I miss hearing songs that have meaning. A generation of young adults taking a collective stand against the establishment. That's what I think is really interesting, that now that I'm teaching college and I see all these young 20-something people in there, and I'm thinking, in the 60s, it was this age group, and I do a little talk for them about the 60s in this one course I teach, and I tell them it was people your age that were, saying, no, we can't stand the hypocrisy, we're not going to take it, we're going to drop out, we're leaving. A lot of them were middle class, a lot of them were college educated, a lot of them dropped out, there's never any absolutes and all this stuff. And many of them adopted poverty. There are not a lot of hippies that came out of really poverty background, but many of them were from just from the middle class.
I don't think they adopted poverty
Okay.
willingly.
Not necessarily.
They didn't know how to go back to the land. They had no training.
In the sense, by adopting poverty, I mean that they could have made, it was a choice to go live off the land
Right.
and not
You're right.
make
You're right.
a lot of money,
Yeah.
and to live very simply, and to not, go to a corporate job and stay in the city and do that whole rat race thing. So it was because a lot of hippies really didn't have much money. We didn't. But that was okay. It's not a negative. One old-timer participant said every hippie I ever knew came from some sort of affluence. So that's not true for everyone, but
Oh my goodness.
so this was at their place, the Evans Farm Harmony, and that was a boogie. We called them boogies, and they happened almost every weekend. There was a boogie. There were a lot of musicians, and people had them dances in their fields. I don't think this happened during the winter so much. It was pretty much a fair
This was
weather.
the first Comptche Fun and Fair Day,
Oh.
Fair and Fun Day, whatever we called it.
There were different types of it. This is also this applies to really any population group. There's going to be people who are more funky than other people, but definitely. And so not all hippies were dirty, stinky hippies. They were different kinds of hippies, or back to landers anyway. And there's quite a few that don't want to be called a hippie, and that was made very clear to me. I am not a hippie. I never was a hippie, but she's a back to lander. So people get really. It's about identity and how you identify. So
Can I say something about that
Yeah.
too? That's just back to the other chart about the list. The New Left also. People that I was involved with didn't consider ourselves hippies.
it's true.
Yeah.
You never hear that word really.
Yeah.
It's just more
That was
campus
surprising.
radicals, but those are names that a lot of right-wing think tanks came up with to discredit the movement. There's a lot of literature on that, on what was done in the 80s by think tanks to really put the whole movement down, because the movement really made change and it did rock.
Well, where did the word hip come from? Was that when did it actually start? Was it a music?
Does anybody
Scene?
know?
I think
the hip-
that
Herb Cain
yeah,
invented the term hippie.
Who did?
He was a
Oh,
college
this
Cain.
was
Herb
San
Cain.
Francisco.
Oh,
Yeah, I
okay.
remember
He's
the-
credited with inventing the term hippie.
Okay.
Okay, but it was
Insects.
from the word hip.
Pardon?
It was from
Oh,
hip.
from
It's from hip, and hip was a term that hipsters or people
Oh,
that
okay.
You were in it, you were somebody.
and hip meant knowledgeable or
I like that.
in the know
In the know,
or
yeah.
people thought.
It's kind of like in the groove, meaning, in the channel, in the record.
Actually, the term on the hip comes from smoking opium like alcohol.
Really?
Yes.
Wow. Okay. So, and that's what's great about anthropology. You don't have to know everything. You can just present it and see what others
I'm
people
gonna get some feedback.
Yeah. So here's just a couple of slides of people in Comptche. This was a wedding, McCormick's. Is that McCormick's wedding? And I don't know all the adults, so I didn't put names. But when you see kid pictures, they're all named.
And that Jennifer and Joni is not the 70s.
This one here.
No, far left.
This isn't the 70s.
Far left.
That's not the 70s.
When is Jennifer? didn't
Joni
come
Lafitte
until
and
maybe
Jennifer.
Jennifer.
Okay,
Jennifer,
I'm
yeah.
gonna scratch that one.
So that's 80s?
Maybe 79, but probably 80. Because I think that's at Bob and Edith's
Okay.
party, their house.
Okay.
What was their 50-year anniversary?
But there was a lot of music and getting together and.
What's her name?
Here's your daddy.
Green.
Judy Green.
No.
Here's my mom. Right here.
Right.
Amanda.
Amanda.
Wasn't that
And
Amanda?
Clayton Roberts, I didn't know him very well, but he's still in Comptche, and he came, when I called for pictures, he came with pictures, and he lives at what was the tavern. That's a whole nother interesting story, which I don't have time to.
Oh, Roger.
I don't know
Which
who.
one?
That guy talking
This
to
one.
Roger Conover.
Yeah.
I think that's one of James Maddox's weddings.
Okay.
I think you're right.
Lady with long blonde hair.
Oh.
Oh my God.
Now, I wanted to have a special slide here, and I really didn't know if you were going to be here or not. I thought, too bad they're not going to be there, because I have this one slide, because
How much he looks like Matt.
there was always families
Yeah.
that were kind of bridge families. It's among the old timer population. There were families that really they were just so open and got along with everyone. And the Evans were certainly one of those families from the back to Lander side.
We were just a little suburban housewife.
There you were. You were
And you got
hippie.
hip. But anyway, I love those pictures.
And Carlos.
So now what I found from all the from the material from the research the interviews and the questionnaires I did with the participants, this is where we're going to get into that, and I'll try to move through it pretty quick. But sources of livelihood, differences in the other, reasons to live in Comptche, learning country living skills, volunteering, issues of conflict, issues in common, events, and common ground. All of this stuff came out of the material, and I didn't know that before. It's one of the neat things that happen when you do this this data sorting afterwards. So I'll show you what we found. So sources of livelihood, old comers, welfare recipient, barterer. There was a lot of bartering going on. Farmer, producing eggs, dairy, meat, butcher, construction worker, received family support, child support recipient, teacher, preacher, mill worker, firewood cutter, massage therapist, nonprofit agency employee, entrepreneur, investment income, vehicle repair, artist, musician, and it practically just goes off. But most people had, like this says, more than one source of income. The old timers tended to identify their work as logger, mill worker, rancher, farmer, producing eggs, dairy, and meat. A lot of sheep are raised up there, cattle and sheep. Land surveyor, local business owner or employee. There's a few small businesses in Comptche. Government employee, there's the post office and the school. Fisheries, firewood cutter, social security. That would be Bill Wilson, probably, he was on disability. And independent realtor and retirement pension. So that kind of gives you a sense too of what people were doing to fill the cupboard. So I thought there's a conception that it's just sort of a stereotype that hippies were lazy, but I think we worked really hard. We didn't use the word chores, we didn't use the word duty, we didn't use the word, words like that. But I can remember my friends would say they had chores on the bus home. We'd all want to meet up after school with our horses and ride, but some of them would have chores to do, and I thought, well, I had to have chores too. So I said, yeah, I got chores too, but I really didn't. I was lying.
Katie's name and why.
Katie's name, thank you, Katie. And I also misspelled her son name. It's Katie with an I. Here's Bob Evans with his butcher shop, and there's David Taya. I'm not sure what he's doing there. Something. There's Jody Evans down there cutting hair. There's probably a lot of bartering going on there. And
Six-pack of Pepsi.
That's right.
That's what I was gonna say, six-pack of Pepsi in your haircut at Jody's.
That was the only time we were allowed to buy Pepsi. I haven't given it up either.
And, people working on their land. There's a lot of really great pictures of this sort. The different household amenities that people had in their homes. And again, this is from information from both old-timers and newcomers. I thought it was really interesting. Just about everybody had a radio. If nothing else, they had a radio. And some people, one family had nothing. They had none of it. Rural have none of this stuff. And not even plumbing or anything, but I know there was one Bachelor-Lander family with a microwave oven, because that's the very first time I ever saw one, but they didn't participate in the study. Other people mentioned other things that they had here.
There was a lot of propane things.
There was a lot of propane stuff, and there was just remember this chart, because I'll refer back to it in a few slides, but this kind of comes back, and again, in the pattern of things. So this difference is in the other. I asked people, how did they refer? I mean, when you're only with your group, how do you refer to the other? And people were really honest, it appears. One thing that really was the most common comment from old-timers about the newcomers was that the Bachelor-Landers really smelled bad.
There was that patchouli.
It was the patchouli, not really body odor so much, and some people didn't have showers. They didn't have, as you could see, the household amenities. They may not have had indoor plumbing, and they would go to Bill Wilson's to shower or something, or go swimming in the river. But there was, I thought that was kind of funny that one of the most common comments about the newcomers was smell. That was the biggest differentiation. And then the hair, and the food, pie like pie crust, because hippie women were, and I'm sorry, I use the term lightly, Bachelor-Lander women were making whole wheat pie crust. And Comptche was really big on pies. We do a lot with pies out there. And this whole wheat pie crust really wasn't working. So, and this comment about does he salute the flag, that would come up at the Grange, when they were trying to decide whether to admit new members, because, you know, backlanders were withdrawing from the government and, or, you know, supporting the government, being patriotic, and no, they wouldn't salute the flag, they would use it as a patch on their pants, which was a no-no back then. Now it's all over the place on everybody's clothes, but I remember when I was a kid, you shouldn't use the flag for, you know, patches and stuff, but anyway, so there was differences. These signs, they're meant in jest. I don't think these were real. I don't remember us ever, but they're like jokes, but they're also, in all good jokes, there's elements of truth.
Yeah, there's something.
And so this is kind of the basic representation, graphic representation of the conflict in Comptche. It's sort of funny, but yet it's there, and they did get rid of it. They did overcome it. So this story has a happy ending. But these are the slang that we used, and I will let you guys read that yourselves. Some of them. You can see those. Anyone still reading? Reasons to live in Comptche, and this was cited by both new and old residents. Nature, the natural beauty, just like was stated so eloquently by those two women. Health, children, it's a great place to raise kids. Land use, of course, timber, ranching, and farming. And one lady a participant was very upfront, and she just said, so I could grow and smoke pot. And she's like, I'll come out and tell everybody. And she's not afraid to talk about it, or, you know, she's now in her 80s and still smokes pot. But she has her license, and, you know, she's just very, I'm from Washington State, and it's legal there, so I've become a lot more comfortable talking about this. But otherwise, pot is not really in this study, because since it's illegal in California, we won't talk about it. But there were still people that brought it up, so I included, because to not talk about it would also be weird, because everybody knows it's there.
Can I just say one thing? The children, a safe place to live and raise kids. When you were a child, you could run all over Comptche with no fear. And now there is fear, but it's not because of you're afraid your kid's going to get kidnapped or something, but there are now wild animals that the old timers used to take care of. Every varmint they did in, because there was
Because it would eat the garden, it would
eat kids.
And now small children can't run around Comptche.
Oh, wow. There are mountain lions.
There's mountain lions.
Yeah, there's some big animals out there. So it was a very
Yes.
still is.
Traffic. That's true.
And so here's some great kids. Bill Wilson he's not an old timer, but he was there. I think he lived during the 50s. Is that right, Larry? Do you think?
I don't think it was in the 50s.
He's sort of
Probably the
in between.
mid to late 60s.
But Edith acted more like an old timer. She was active in the Grange, and those were her friends and stuff. So, but Bill interacted a lot with the newcomers, and he would load us all up in he would go around and collect trash from people, making a dump run. Everybody would throw their trash in there, and he'd put us kids on top, and he'd go to Navarro and do the dump run, and then he'd get us all candy at the store and drive us back. And a lot of us kids spent many times riding on the cattle rack, but he taught a lot of us how to drive in that pickup. It was 3 on the tree. And this is Scott Evans, and here's me at a wedding in our pasture.
That's also at a wedding in your pasture, Scott.
The one with Scott? Oh, yeah. And there's the McDonald's. That's my neighbors. They still live there. My old neighbors. There's more trees in front now. So here's some other Comptche kids.
Oh, good.
And I caught Matt's misspelling, and I didn't catch it in time on it. Thank you. There's another place where I think it's spelled right. Sorry.
Katie right on time.
Yeah. Katie's right once in a while.
Nice kid.
Yeah, they are nice girls.
This is some of these two are at my house. There's a couple of these two are sisters. These kids, this is on the Parker boys, they lived out in the commune. There was a commune out there for a while in Comptche. Anyway, just kids and animals. It was great. There was how did we learn to live in the country? Most of the, I don't know, I guess I could say most. A lot of the back-to-landers did not know how to live in the country in every way that you need to. They might have known how to do canning or something. I've heard some people came with experience on how to cook with a wood cook stove, but I just thought it was really interesting where the back-to-landers got their information and how did they learn. Because and then these books and periodicals, again, I don't know if you can read them all, but they're like the Foxfire series and Mother Earth News and Country Woman Magazine and Albion Magazine, Farmer's Almanac. And then, so resources that are books and journals, and then there's a lot of people resources, person-based resources, old-timers.
Boy, we asked a lot of questions.
Yeah, and there were old-timers that were patient and would sit and teach you how to do stuff, especially the women with sewing and embroidery and that type of stuff. A lot of women.
What's the name of the sewing group? So-and-so's?
So-and-so's and Stitch and Bitch, depending on which group.
Which group or what?
But anyway, just lots of different, a lot of old-timers would say, they just grew up that way, and those things that you almost take for granted. Yeah?
When I moved to Comptche, I moved into the old East place that's on North Springs, and it was like a road map. It had a root cellar, it had an orchard, it had chickens, it had, all that was set up by this homesteading family.
Wow.
And
it was all there.
It was all there.
You had some interesting stories about, did you go fishing with Joel Beek and learn how to can salmon or something? Said you'd never do it again. Was that your story?
I'm
Is
sorry.
that your story?
Which one?
About canning salmon? Anyway,
Yeah,
it's okay.
could be. Joel Beek and I used to do
and that was your story. Here's Bill and Edith Wilson that I referred to a number of times. Very, very helpful for a lot of back-to-lander families that moved in. And they took on a pair of kids, a brother and sister, who were basically abandoned by their mom. Something happened and he built a place for them to stay and took care of them. So really great people. I mean, not everyone gets along with everyone anywhere, but generally that was a good relationship. These are pictures of the Comptche Grange getting some renovation work done, and there's a lot of, I don't have a lot of pictures from old timers, but there's just a good crowd of, you did Chris there. Richie Wells, I think he might be right there. But a lot of the men that were the pillars of the community are in this series of pictures of working on the Grange. So volunteering was really big. That's one of the cultural domains. And the top three that people mentioned were the Comptche Volunteer Fire Department and the auxiliary group that raises the money for the fire department and being the teacher's aide. And all these other areas of volunteering. Volunteering is a really big part of Comptche life, and it's part of how people eventually worked out their differences. So there's issues of conflict. There was social exclusion. It wasn't huge, but a lot of the back-to-landers that wanted to join the Grange were not allowed because of the differences that we've been talking about. The funny thing is, one of the old-timers told me a story that the hippies that really wanted to join just went down to Whitesburg Grange and Albion and joined there. Knew they could be members. So, but I don't know. I wouldn't have tried so hard to be a member if I wasn't wanted. But anyway, somebody was strong-headed about that. But issues of conflict, as we're saying, and then appearances and smell, land use.
Goodness.
There was a lot of. That's your picture. And so Yvonne DeWitt lived in this barn. This was really a common thing to take an old barn or old structure and turn it into a house. And she just one of the classic back-to-lander ladies. Yes. She had a garden and stuff here. This was sort of in between ownership, I think, isn't it? But she had a nice garden and that type of thing out there. Issues of land use I'm going to get into a little bit more on another slide, but children were also a source of conflict, not in a huge way, but in terms of all of us kids just wanted to hang out, and a lot of the old-timer girls, and in my case, because I'm a girl, and we all just wanted to play together and ride, and one of the old-timer girls told me that they were really happy when we all started moving in, because they were like, more kids, great. So kids are great, they don't care. They just want to hang out and play and make friends and go do stuff. But it was really, the issue really was among the adults. And then, of course, pot was an issue of conflict. So one of the issues of conflict around land use in specific was that some back-to-the-landers, and I don't know anyone in particular who did this, there were quite a number of transient type of back-to-landers that came in and then left, but I think they tended to not be with families and that type of thing. But a lot of the mill shacks that the old loggers had left, that you had just learned all about, had left their mill shacks around on their property, and
Do you recognize it?
that's right. This is right off.
Oh, right.
It's an easy shot. It's right by the firehouse. But they, some people would come in and just take the timber and reconstruct a building for themselves somewhere else. Or they would just live in them, so it was basically squatting and trespassing, and that wasn't okay. So that created some conflict. Some people asked if they could forage on people's private land, and other people didn't. So there was that do your own thing, it feels good ethic that crossed boundaries, then that's where some of the conflict came from. Some resentment. The thing about building without permits, interestingly enough, was not an issue of conflict because everybody did it. Nobody, that was even in the county, it's probably changed by now, but in the county was, Comptche's notorious for nobody out there builds with permits, so. It is different now, yeah. And now you can do aerial, Google, and it'd be so easy to tell nowadays, if you were working for the county and wanted to find that stuff out. This is a wonderful house, but this is a beautiful representation, I think, of the kind of structures that were being cobbled together.
You know how hard it was to get that firewood down that hill? Big job.
Yeah, and it probably was hard to heat that place.
I don't remember it being warm ever.
There were concerns that people had in common, though, in terms of everyone wanting to work on these issues together: land use, children, water, and fire. Fire was a common foe. That equalized everybody. Residents didn't call a town meeting over being blackballed by the Grange. There was a lot of gossip that went with that. But when the issues of land use got everyone to the table, because the county asked everybody, asked all the towns in Mendocino County to do zoning. There's a picture of Buddy Stimback. This is in that same Grange series. They had torn out the floor here, replaced the floor in there. So there's events that happened in the 70s that were specific to each group. The old timers in particular had shivarees, which I'd never heard of before, and I researched them and found out that's a practice that came from Europe, and it was, shivaree means, I think in French, something like obnoxious noise or something, where if there was a couple shacking up and they weren't married, the townsfolk would get together in the middle of the night and make a bunch of noise outside their window, try to shoot off guns or just bang things. So this ritual got brought to the southeast when a lot of the immigrants came to work in the forest in the southeast, and then a lot of those people immigrated here for work, and so they brought those types of ceremonies or rituals with them. But it was then in Comptche used for when people were newlyweds, that they would get a surprise somewhere in the early part of their.
Jimmy had the best one.
And they would shoot off dynamite, shoot guns, bang pots and guns. And then the women had been up all day making food, and then they'd have a big party. So like, wake up, we're gonna party. Yeah. So there's, and anyway, so these are the different types of events, and I should kind of move along here. Comptche had, in the 70s, some musicians out there that did benefits for the fire department. Some of them were residents, some of them came in to visit. But that, the Comptche Fire Department dinners have become famous, and it blows my mind how many people come out there still to this day. They become more and more popular, more well organized.
Oh my.
So Common Ground, here's that same post office. And I like that this is a bunch of the women. I don't know who everyone is. I recognize Katie Ty and Jody Evans there on the end.
Oh my.
So now we're starting to find common ground. The post office is common ground, the store. So we have physical places in Comptche, the fire department. The Grange eventually became common ground because it eventually folded. And now it's the Comptche Community Organization. It's common ground. So there's physical places that are common ground. The county asks people to ask the towns to zone and create town plans. And so Comptche was, I found out from talking to a guy at the county who was there, he was just about ready to retire, but he was there when this was happening. He said Comptche was the only group that elected their members on this board. Other towns in Minnesota County, they were all appointed. But Comptche elected all their board members, and it was good representation from both groups that were living there. And so they came up with this at the end. It's a plan, and I think this should be in the library or something. It's really a wonderful
Who
document.
did the drawing?
Dee McKenzie.
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
of course.
97. So there's a little bit, so this is the area we're talking about, in the Comptche section being here. So these were some of the statements from that document, and this was in the back of their assessment. We found out that we were ladies and gentlemen. We had honor. We weren't sneaky or mean. We still don't agree on everything, but we aren't trying to get each other. And that was this point of contention I heard being mentioned a lot, this feeling that we're out to get each other, and we found out that wasn't true at all. We agreed on every fundamental principle. No one wanted much growth. We all wanted the big farms and timberlands to stay that way. We don't want a tourist trade here. We believe in property rights. We respect our neighbors' rights to live their own way and expect others to respect our ways. So people in Comptche wanted to come there and do their own thing, and within reason, as long as you're not hurting anyone. But the old timers had that value too. So they began to find that they had the same values, even though we had appearances and the superficial stuff that you saw in an earlier slide about immigrants. It's the superficial things and the fear and like the smell that really got in the way. But once people could get beyond that, they began to see that they really had the same values. The common ground, this is the best, I think, that Comptche happens at this fire department. It's just amazing to this day. The people that volunteer and keep that fire going, and they do continual training. You can come to Comptche and be part of the fire department. You can be the fire department. You can support the fire department by volunteering or just going to a breakfast or a dinner. You can volunteer and meet your neighbors. And also the training that people get, the actual firefighters, I think really enhance their standing in the community as well as their own self-esteem. They're doing something that's really important, and they've, put out many fires, and I know we've probably heard about them in the news when they happen. This sign is a really good outcome of this work that was done in the 70s. This sign hangs up in I just copied the words down, but it hangs up in the fire hall. New members urgently needed. Comptche Volunteer Fire Department, young, old, male or female, all are welcome. That represents huge change in Comptche. And then they do amazing things like get into the New York Times. So they're an amazing group. I know, isn't that? So this is the fire chief here.
No lie.
So there's this wonderful thing called collective effervescence, and I'm getting ready to wrap up here, but collective effervescence is part of In anthropology, it's called communitas theory. And communitas is when, is like right now, we're all together doing something and having a good time, hopefully here by choice. And a party is like that. Communitas is important for communities. Comptche is really good at communitas, from the dance cabin to the early hall being built, to people taking care of their needs that way, their social needs. We are social beings. And coming together for a party and a dance is healthy, it's important. I think sometimes we get a little bit like, oh, we're not supposed to go party all the time, but it's really important to party. It just depends on what you do there. So Emile Durkheim is this really great French theorist in anthropology and sociology, so that's where I'm getting this from. But collective effervescence is, so there's communitas, like a party is happening. And then collective effervescence is that one moment at the event when you look around and it's like that peak time, everybody's just right there and having a great time. It might be everybody's happening to be dancing, or there's a time in a meal and everybody's just, and then it goes. But that's collective effervescence, and it's something that people crave and that we want, and it keeps us coming back to volunteer because you know that there's going to be a good time at that event.
We used to have Easter parties. Everybody in town would bring a dish, and we would party. Lisa was the Easter bunny always. Complete uniform.
And it was, yeah, you go back for that good feeling that you get. It really, it does. It feeds your soul.
And a gold egg, you got a $4.
Yeah, you get a special egg. But there were a lot of those types of gatherings. So it's when you get out, you gather outside of ordinary reality. That's kind of like going on vacation. You leave your normal everyday routine. You get together with friends or your community, and so that's basically what's happening, and it's essential. So resilient communities, I would definitely say Comptche is a resilient community, and there's this wonderful theorist called Robert Theobald, and he defines 3 criteria for healthy communities. One is the shared values are identified by the community. Well, that happened when they were doing the zoning. That was a 3-year process. They identified their shared values. Participatory decision-making, that also happened during that time. It also happens in the other community groups in Comptche. There's the auxiliary, the fire auxiliary, there's the Comptche community organization. So there's participatory decision-making going on in all those activities. Shared commitment to environmental preservation, and that's definitely happening in Comptche. Even though there's people doing timber work, they don't want to just cut it all down. It's managed, and that's the way the land is zoned. And so all of these things are part of what makes Comptche a resilient community. Findings in rural studies. There's conflict between newcomers and established residents can be expected. Relationships lead to common ground. So we found when these people could start having a relationship instead of just kind of like looking at them going by or not wanting them to come in or not wanting to socialize with those people. But when you can start having relationships, then you can start to get to know each other. Common ground relationships reveal they have more values in common than previously assumed, and relationships are key to finding common ground. So if you're going to find common ground, you got to build those relationships. And I didn't know this woman's name. If I don't know if anyone knows her, but the quilt tradition in Comptche is really a big part of the
Right at the end, that's at the end of the name.
Yes, she did. I did get that one. So there's a few research findings that, to wrap all this up, events and traditions create and support common ground. So we have social cohesion, fundraising, integrating newcomers. So all these things like the fire department and volunteering are a really great way for newcomers to integrate. And now whenever I go back to Comptche and I go to their auxiliary meetings for the fire, I go to just, because I used to be part of that, and there's a new people. And you need new people to keep communities healthy. Finding common ground resolves community conflict through relationships and mutual support for shared values, such as the fire department, and by providing a forum for discussion and debate. Common ground is both a place and a quality, and it's mutually agreed upon. So when you're going to go and just squat in mill shacks, that's not cool common ground, and that's that's creating conflict. So you need to ask and go and have a relationship. Hey, can I stay in this cabin and I'll, do some work around here or something. And also by being open to all and serving all, organizations and communities thrive. But when they're closed, they're full. Like the Grange, the building is still there, but the organization within it folded. Newcomers,
It's more
it changed.
happening.
Yeah, well, a lot of the members, they died, and then the people weren't interested, so. Newcomers are needed to keep communities from dying and becoming stagnant. A resilient community has ways to welcome and integrate newcomers. Comptche fits all of those things. And this is outside of the Grange right now. They did some more recent remodeling, and I like this. It's a big painting, and this is just some of the tiles on it. And I think it's great because it represents some of the, I think that's Jerry Philbrick, and there's just some of the newcomer, or the Baxalander types here, and it represents.
I think that's Jerry.
It's not?
No,
Ken.
it's Ken.
Oh, okay.
It's Kim, huh?
Ken and James.
Mike and Ann.
That's Brittany and Brett's mom, Nancy.
I'm glad you put names on that one.
John Beers, Brian McCormick.
Wow.
Rick Rick.
Oh, yeah, she can put names on it.
Wow.
James, Diana, and Amy.
Oh, your mom, yeah.
The Bloffelds, yeah.
The rumor is that they were all holding beers instead of.
I think
Oh,
of
and
beers
tools.
and other
That was Jimmy Natas. They were having,
That was at the
there we go. So, anyway, that is the, that's my research, that's what I found.
Lisa, thank you so very, very much. It was fascinating and wonderful. I love the idea of collective effervescence. We should all get together with good energy, and partying is really important. Those are wonderful, wonderful messages to take away. So thank you very much for joining us today and bringing history out here to us. And we hope to see you all again at another Sunday afternoon with next month. We're going to have Camille Parsons talk about the Second Story Dance Studio and dance out here along the coast. So that's what's in store for us next month. But thank you again, Lisa. Wonderful. Talking to the guest on another hour.